The woman's scream tore through the afternoon air like a bullet ricocheting off canyon walls, and Xander Ashford knew before he even looked up from watering his horse that someone was about to die. He dropped the bucket and ran toward the old Chapman barn at the edge of Keeler, California, where black smoke was already beginning to curl from the hayloft windows, like devil's fingers reaching for heaven. The year was 1882, and Xander had seen enough death in his 26 years to recognize its particular smell, but what he heard next made his blood run cold in a way that no outlaw's gun ever had the piercing wail of a child. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges, and Xander could see flames licking up the far wall where someone had carelessly knocked over a lantern, or maybe where sparks from the nearby forge had caught. The whole structure was nothing but dried timber and old hay, perfect kindling that would go up like newspaper in about 10 minutes flat. Through the smoke and heat shimmer, he spotted them on the second level, a young woman with dark hair clutching a small child to her chest, maybe 3 years old from the look of it, both of them trapped on the loft platform as flames climbed the ladder behind them. "The beam is breaking!" she screamed, and Xander saw it. Then the main support beam that ran across the ceiling directly above her head was already sagging, groaning under the stress of the fire weakening its joints. Splinters were raining down on the woman and child, and if that beam gave way, it would crush them both before the flames ever got the chance. Xander did not think. He never thought much in situations like this, which was probably why he was still alive when so many thinking men were dead. He grabbed a coil of rope from a hook near the door and sprinted up what remained of the ladder, feeling the rungs crack beneath his boots. The smoke was thick enough to choke a bull, and his eyes streamed tears that he blinked away furiously as he pulled himself onto the loft platform. The woman stared at him with wide hazel eyes, her face streaked with soot and terror. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, wearing a simple calico dress that was now torn and smoking at the hem. The child in her arms was a little girl with blonde curls, coughing and crying into her mother's shoulder. "The beam!" the woman gasped, pointing upward with one shaking hand while keeping the other locked around her daughter. "It is going to fall!" Xander looked up and saw she was right. The massive wooden beam was cracking down the middle, splitting with sounds like gunshots. They had maybe 2 minutes before the whole thing came down, and the platform they stood on was already beginning to sway as the fire ate through its supports. Below them, the barn floor was a sea of flames that would cook them alive if they tried to jump. "Listen to me," Xander said, his voice cutting through the roar of the fire, with the kind of authority he had learned leading cattle drives across hostile territory. "That rope is tied to my saddle horn outside. My horse will not move. I need you to trust me." "I do not even know you," she said, but her voice was breaking with desperation. "Name is Xander Ashford, and I am going to get you both out of here." He was already looping the rope around his waist, making a harness that would hold both her and the child. "But that beam is going to give way any second, so we are out of time for introductions." The barn beam groaned above them, a sound like the earth itself was crying out in pain, and a shower of burning splinters rained down on their heads. The woman made a decision. Xander saw it happen in her eyes, that moment when terror gave way to trust, born of pure necessity. "Into my arms," Xander said, holding them out to her. "Jump now." She launched herself at him without hesitation, the child sandwiched between them, and Xander caught them both against his chest. The impact nearly sent them all tumbling backward, but he planted his boots and held firm. He could feel the woman's heart hammering against his ribs, could smell the smoke in her hair and something else underneath it, something like lavender and sunshine that seemed impossible in this hell. "Hold on to me," he commanded, and she locked her arms around his neck with one hand, while keeping her daughter pressed between them with the other. Xander secured the rope around all three of them, yanking it tight enough that he knew it would hold. The beam above them gave another tortured groan, and he saw the crack widen by another 3 inches. "Close your eyes," he told the woman, then stepped backward off the platform into empty air. They dropped like stones, the rope burning through his gloved hands as he let it slide in controlled intervals. The woman screamed once, then cut it off and pressed her face into his shoulder. The child was eerily silent, probably too shocked to make a sound. Xander counted seconds in his head, 3, 4, 5, and then his boots hit the burning barn floor. The impact jarred every bone in his body, but he was already moving, running for the door, with his living cargo clutched against him. He felt the concussion of the beam falling behind them, felt the wave of heat as it crashed down onto the very spot where they had been standing moments before, sending up a geyser of sparks and flame that chased them like a living thing. Xander's lungs were screaming for air. His eyes were nearly swollen shut from the smoke, but he kept running until they burst through the barn door into the clean desert air of Keeler. He made it another 20 feet before his legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees in the dirt, the woman and child still wrapped in his arms. People were running toward them, now the blacksmith, the general store owner, a couple of ranch hands who had seen the smoke. Someone threw a bucket of water over all three of them, and Xander gasped at the shock of it, blinking his vision clear. The woman was looking at him. That was the first thing he saw when his eyes focused again. Her face streaked with tears and soot, those hazel eyes looking at him like he had just given her the sun and moon wrapped in paper. Her daughter was crying now, loud hiccuping sobs, but she was alive, and that was what mattered. "You saved us," the woman whispered. Her voice was hoarse from the smoke, but it was the sweetest sound Xander had ever heard. "You saved my daughter." "Could not very well let you burn," Xander said, which was inadequate and stupid, but his brain was not working right just yet. Behind them, the barn collapsed with a roar, sending up a column of fire and sparks that rose 50 feet into the California sky. The woman flinched and held her daughter tighter, and Xander found himself putting his arm around both of them, shielding them from even the sight of it. "I am Delilah Parker," she said, and it seemed important to her that he know this. "This is my daughter, Anna. We have been in Keeler for 3 weeks. I work at the boarding house, and Anna was playing near the barn while I finished the washing. I heard her scream, and when I ran in, she was trapped by the flames. I thought," her voice broke, "I thought we were both going to die." "You did not," Xander said firmly. "You are both all right. That is all that matters." The town doctor, a grizzled man named Hoffman, pushed through the small crowd that had gathered. "Let me look at them," he demanded, and Xander reluctantly released Delilah and her daughter. Hoffman examined them both with efficient movements, checking their breathing, looking in their eyes, feeling for broken bones. "Smoke inhalation, some minor burns, but nothing serious. You are a lucky woman, Mrs. Parker." "Miss Parker," Delilah corrected quietly, and it was not luck. It was him. She looked back at Xander, who was now sitting in the dirt, feeling like he had been trampled by a longhorn bull. "He jumped off that platform holding us both. He could have died." "Probably should have," Hoffman muttered, turning his attention to Xander. "You are an idiot, Ashford. A heroic idiot, but still an idiot. Could have broken your fool neck." "Did not, though," Xander said, managing a weak grin. Now that the immediate danger was past, his body was starting to inform him of all the ways it had been abused. His ribs ached where Delilah had grabbed him. His hands were burned raw despite the gloves, and his head was pounding like someone was using it for an anvil. But when he looked at Delilah, sitting there in the dirt with her daughter in her lap, both of them alive and breathing, he figured it was worth it. The next hours passed in a blur. Hoffman insisted on treating everyone in his office above the general store, slathering burns with solve, and making them all drink tea that tasted like boiled leather. The sheriff came by to ask questions about how the fire started, though everyone agreed it had been an accident, some combination of the afternoon heat and dried hay, and maybe a spark from somewhere. The Chapman barn had been a disaster waiting to happen for years. By the time Hoffman released them, the sun was setting over the Inyo Mountains, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Xander entirely too much of the fire. He walked out of the doctor's office to find Delilah, waiting on the steps with Anna asleep in her arms. The little girl's face was clean now, her blonde curls brushed and shining, though her dress was still ruined. "I wanted to thank you properly," Delilah said, standing as he approached. "I have nothing to give you, no money, no—" "Do not want anything," Xander interrupted. "Just glad you are both all right." Delilah studied him in the dying light, and Xander found himself studying her right back. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her features and everything to do with the strength he could see in the set of her jaw, the determination in her eyes. She had run into a burning barn to save her daughter without a second thought for her own life. That was the kind of courage Xander respected more than anything. "Then at least let me cook you dinner," Delilah said. "Tomorrow night, it is the least I can do." Xander knew he should probably say no. He was leaving Keeler in a week, heading north to deliver a herd of cattle for the ranch he worked for. Getting involved with anyone, especially a woman with a child, was the kind of complication he had spent his adult life avoiding, but when he opened his mouth, what came out was, "I would like that." The smile that lit up Delilah's face made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with smoke inhalation. "Tomorrow at 6, she said, "at the boarding house. Do you know where it is?" "I know it," Xander confirmed. The boarding house was the only one in Keeler, a 2-story building near the center of town that served meals to travelers and housed anyone passing through who needed a bed for the night. Delilah shifted Anna in her arms, and Xander saw how exhausted she was, the events of the day catching up with her all at once. "Go get some rest," he said gently. "Both of you need it. So do you," Delilah said, but she was already moving toward the boarding house. She paused after a few steps and looked back over her shoulder. "Thank you, Xander Ashford. For my life and my daughter's life. I will never forget what you did today." Then she was gone, disappearing into the gathering darkness, and Xander stood there in the dusty street, feeling like something fundamental had just shifted in his world. He could not name it, could not quite put his finger on what had changed, but he knew with bone-deep certainty that his life had just veered off in a new direction. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Xander tried to keep busy with his usual work tending the horses, repairing tack, helping the ranch foreman with paperwork for the upcoming cattle drive. But his mind kept wandering back to Delilah Parker and her daughter. He found himself wondering about her story, about where she had come from, and why she was working at a boarding house in a dusty mining town at the edge of the California desert. The fact that she was unmarried with a child suggested a tragedy of some kind, but Xander knew better than to pry into painful subjects uninvited. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, he had bathed in the horse trough, changed into his cleanest shirt, and combed his dark hair back as best he could. He caught sight of himself in the mirror above the water basin and almost laughed. When had he last cared what he looked like for dinner? The boarding house dining room was mostly empty when he arrived, just a couple of miners eating in the corner and an old woman who worked the front desk. Delilah appeared from the kitchen carrying a covered dish, her face lighting up when she saw him. She had changed into a dark blue dress that brought out the color in her eyes, and her hair was pinned up in a way that showed off the elegant line of her neck. "You came," she said, and there was real relief in her voice, as if she had half expected him not to show. "Said I would," Xander replied, removing his hat. "I keep my word." Delilah led him to a table by the window, away from the other diners. "Anna is asleep upstairs," she explained as she set down plates and utensils. "She was exhausted from yesterday. The doctor said she should rest. And you? How are you feeling?" "Sore, shaken, grateful." Delilah disappeared back into the kitchen and returned with platters of food, roasted chicken, potatoes, greens, fresh bread that was still steaming. "I convinced the boarding house owner to let me use the kitchen for tonight. She owes me anyway, since I do most of the cooking around here." The food was excellent, better than anything Xander had eaten in months of trail rations and quick meals grabbed between work shifts. But he found himself paying more attention to Delilah than to his plate, watching the way she moved, the way she smiled when she caught him looking at her. "Tell me about yourself," Delilah said after they had been eating in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Where are you from originally?" "Texas," Xander said. "Little town called Sweetwater, north of Fort Worth. My pa raised cattle, and I learned the trade from him. He died when I was 19, and my ma followed a year later. Did not have any siblings, so I sold the ranch and started working drives. Been moving around ever since." 7 years of moving around, Delilah calculated. "Do you ever get tired of it, not having a place to call home?" Xander considered the question. "Sometimes, but the trail suits me. Every day is different. Every season brings new challenges. I am good at what I do, and I like the freedom of it." "Freedom," Delilah repeated softly. And there was something wistful in her voice that made Xander lean forward. "What about you? Where does your story start?" Delilah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers playing with the edge of her napkin. "Ohio originally, small farming community. I married young, too young, really. I was 17 and thought I knew everything about the world. My husband was older, 25, and he seemed so sophisticated compared to the boys I had grown up with." She paused, and Xander waited patiently, sensing there was pain in whatever came next. "Robert was not a bad man, but he was not a good husband. He drank too much, gambled away money we did not have. Anna was born 9 months after we married, and for a while, I thought she would change him. She did not. When Anna was 2, Robert heard about the mining opportunities in California and decided we should come west to make our fortune. Delilah's laugh was bitter. There was no fortune, just a terrible accident in the mines that killed him and left Anna and me alone with nothing but debts. I am sorry, Xander said quietly. Do not be. I mourned what I thought I had lost, but honestly, I am freer now than I ever was when Robert was alive. I can make my own decisions, raise Anna the way I think is best. The owner of the boarding house, Mrs. Chen, she gave me work when no one else would, lets me keep Anna close while I work. It is not much, but it is ours. The pride in Delilah's voice struck something deep in Xander's chest. She reminded him of the wild horses he sometimes saw in the mountains, beautiful and strong and absolutely unbreakable, no matter how hard life tried to tame them. They talked for hours, long after the food was gone and the other diners had left. Delilah told him about Anna's precocious personality, about her dreams of maybe someday opening her own restaurant. Xander told her about trail drives, about sleeping under stars so bright they looked like scattered diamonds, about the time he and his crew had to outrun a grass fire that stretched for miles. It was nearly 10 o'clock when Delilah finally stood to clear the dishes. I should let you go, she said reluctantly. I am sure you have work tomorrow. Before dawn, Xander confirmed, standing as well. He helped her carry the dishes to the kitchen, ignoring her protests. As they worked side by side, washing and drying, he found himself intensely aware of her presence, the brush of her arm against his, the faint scent of lavender in her hair, the way she hummed softly under her breath. Xander, Delilah said as they finished. Her voice was hesitant, almost nervous. Would you want to do this again? Dinner, I mean. I know you said you were leaving soon, but tomorrow night? Xander interrupted, and the smile that broke across her face was answer enough. Over the next 5 days, Xander found excuses to be in town far more often than his work required. He ate dinner with Delilah every night, sometimes with Anna joining them, sometimes after the little girl had gone to bed. He found himself enchanted by both of them, Anna with her endless questions and infectious laughter, Delilah with her quiet strength and sharp wit. On the 3rd night, after Anna had fallen asleep at the table and Xander had carried her upstairs to the small room she shared with her mother, Delilah kissed him. It was soft and tentative, just a brush of her lips against his as they stood in the hallway outside her door, but it sent electricity shooting through every nerve in Xander's body. I probably should not have done that, Delilah whispered, her cheeks flushed. You are leaving in a few days, and I swore I would not let myself care about anyone again. Too late, Xander said, and kissed her back, deeper this time, his hands coming up to frame her face. She tasted like the apple pie they had eaten for dessert, sweet and perfect. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. What are we doing? Delilah asked, but she was smiling even as she said it. Damned if I know, Xander admitted, but I do not want to stop. On the 5th night, with only 2 days left before the cattle drive, Xander made a decision. He had been wrestling with it for days, turning it over in his mind from every angle, but seeing Delilah again made everything suddenly clear. Come with me, he said as they sat together on the boarding house porch, watching the stars come out over the desert. Anna was inside playing with a doll that Xander had bought her from the general store, singing softly to herself. Delilah turned to look at him, her eyes wide. What? Come with me. You and Anna. The ranch where I work, the Double R up near Sacramento, they are always looking for good cooks. The owner's wife, Sarah Rawlings, she would hire you in a heartbeat if I vouch for you. You could have a real kitchen, a proper house. Anna could go to school. Xander, I cannot just uproot our lives because of a few dinners, Delilah said, but her voice was uncertain. This is not about dinners and you know it. Xander took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Delilah, I have been on my own for 7 years. I never wanted anything more than the next trail, the next adventure. Then I met you, and suddenly all I can think about is what it would be like to come home to you every night, to watch Anna grow up, to build something that lasts. Delilah's eyes were shining with tears. I am afraid, she admitted. I made one terrible choice with a man already. What if I am making another? You are not, Xander said firmly. I am not Robert. I do not drink more than an occasional whiskey. I do not gamble, and I damn sure would never abandon you or Anna. I cannot promise I will be perfect. but I can promise I will try every single day to be the man you and Anna deserve." "You saved our lives," Delilah said softly. "You risked everything for two strangers, and then you stayed. You made Anna laugh for the first time since her father died. You made me feel like maybe the world is not just a hard, cold place after all." "Is that a yes?" Delilah laughed, a sound that was half sob. "It is insane. I have known you less than a week. Sometimes a week is all you need to know what matters." Xander pulled her closer, and she came willingly, resting her head on his shoulder. "Say yes, Delilah. Come build a life with me." She was quiet for so long that Xander's heart started to sink. Then she tilted her head back and kissed him, fierce and decisive. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, we will come with you." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Delilah gave notice to Mrs. Chen, who was sorry to lose her but understood. Xander arranged for a wagon to carry their few belongings and purchase supplies for the journey north. Anna, once the initial shock wore off, was thrilled at the prospect of adventure, asking a million questions about what their new home would be like. They left Keeler on a bright October morning in 1882, the town already shimmering with heat even at dawn. Xander drove the wagon with Delilah beside him, and Anna wedged between them, chattering excitedly about everything they passed. The cattle drive crew had gone ahead the day before, but Xander had arranged to catch up with them at the first waypoint, a small town called Independence, about 30 miles north. The journey to Sacramento would take nearly 2 weeks, following the eastern edge of the Sierra Nevada before cutting west through the mountains. It was a route Xander had traveled many times, but never with cargo this precious. He found himself hyper-aware of every bump in the road, every potential danger, determined to keep his new family safe. They made good time that first day, stopping for lunch beside a creek where Anna could play in the water while Delilah unpacked the food she had prepared. Watching them together, seeing Anna's joy and Delilah's smile, Xander felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was what he had been missing all those years on the trail, this feeling of connection, of purpose beyond just the next horizon. That night, they made camp under a sky so vast and full of stars that Anna insisted on staying up past her bedtime to count them. Delilah sat beside Xander by the fire, her shoulder pressed against his, and they talked quietly about the future they were building together. "I am still scared," Delilah admitted, as the fire burned down to embers. "What if the Rawlings do not hire me? What if Anna hates it there? What if we get there and you realize you made a mistake asking us to come?" "Then we will figure it out together," Xander said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You are not alone anymore, Delilah. Neither of you are. Whatever comes, we face it as a family." The word hung in the air between them, bright and new and full of promise. Family. Xander had not had a family in 7 years, and Delilah's family had been broken and painful. But maybe, just maybe, they could build something better together. Anna fell asleep in the wagon, and Xander carried her to the bedroll Delilah had prepared. As he set her down gently and pulled a blanket over her small form, he felt Delilah come up beside him. They stood together in the darkness, watching Anna sleep, and Xander knew with absolute certainty that he would do anything to protect these two people. They had become his whole world in the span of a week, and he would not trade that for anything. The second day of travel brought them to Independence, where they were supposed to meet up with the cattle drive crew. But when they arrived, the foreman, a grizzled veteran named Pike, had bad news. 3 of the hands quit yesterday, Pike told Xander, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. Said the pay was not worth the risk, what with all the rustler activity up north. We do not have enough men to move the herd safely. Xander felt his stomach drop. What does that mean for the drive? Means it is delayed at least a week while we find replacements. Maybe longer. Pike eyed Delilah and Anna with undisguised curiosity. "You picking up passengers now, Ashford?" "This is Delilah Parker and her daughter Anna," Xander said, putting enough steel in his voice that Pike's eyebrows rose. "They are coming to work at the ranch. Mrs. Rawlings is expecting them." That was a lie. Sarah Rawlings had no idea they were coming, but Pike did not need to know that. "Well, if the drive is delayed, you might as well head on to the ranch without us," Pike said with a shrug. "No sense in you waiting around here. The crew can catch up once we get sorted." It was not ideal, but Xander could see the logic in it. The longer Delilah and Anna stayed in limbo, the more time they had to second-guess this decision. Better to get them settled at the ranch where they would be safe and comfortable. "We will push on," Xander agreed. "Send word once you have the crew together." They left Independence that afternoon and continued north, following the wagon roads that skirted the edge of the Sierra Nevada. The landscape was stark and beautiful, all sage and scrub and distant mountains that shimmered in the heat. Anna was endlessly fascinated by everything they passed: jackrabbits, hawks circling overhead, the occasional deer drinking from a stream. On the fourth day, they stopped in a town called Bishop to resupply. While Xander was loading flour and beans into the wagon, a well-dressed man approached Delilah, where she was standing with Anna outside the general store. Xander noticed him from across the street and felt a twist of unease. The man was too smooth, too polished for this rough country, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Xander made in 6 months. He could not hear what the man was saying, but he saw Delilah's face go pale, saw her pull Anna closer. Xander dropped the bag of flour and crossed the street in 3 long strides. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice pleasant, but his eyes hard. The man turned, looking Xander up and down with obvious disdain. "No problem at all. I was just renewing an old acquaintance with Mrs. Parker." "It is Miss Parker," Delilah said tightly. "And we were not acquainted, Mr. Wallace. You were my late husband's creditor. That does not make us friends." Understanding clicked into place. This was one of the men Robert Parker had owed money to, come to collect from his widow. Xander felt anger rise hot in his chest. "Any debts your husband owed died with him," Xander said flatly. "His widow and daughter do not owe you a thing." Wallace's smile was thin and unpleasant. "That is not how the law sees it, Cowboy. Mrs. Parker signed as guarantor on several of her husband's loans. That makes her liable for the full amount, $800, plus interest." Xander saw Delilah go even paler. $800 might as well have been $8,000 for someone in her position. It would take years to pay off that kind of debt on a boarding house cook's wages. "Show me the paperwork," Xander demanded. Wallace produced a sheaf of documents from his jacket, and Xander scanned them quickly. His reading was not the best. He had only had a few years of schooling, but he could make out enough to see that Wallace was telling the truth. Delilah's signature was there on the bottom of multiple loan agreements, probably signed without her fully understanding what she was agreeing to. "This is not enforceable," Xander said, handing the papers back. "These loans were taken out in Ohio. You have no jurisdiction in California." "I have associates in every territory," Wallace said smoothly. "If Mrs. Parker thinks she can escape her obligations by running west, she is mistaken. I will find her wherever she goes, and if she cannot pay, I will see her put in debtor's prison along with her daughter." Anna started to cry, and Delilah clutched her tighter. Xander felt rage building in him, like a pressure cooker about to explode, but he forced himself to stay calm. Violence would not solve this problem. "How much to settle the debt right now?" he asked. Wallace's eyes lit up with predatory interest. $600 cash would settle it. I would forgive the rest to be done with her. $600. Xander had maybe $300 saved from years of careful work, and he had already spent a good portion of that outfitting the wagon and buying supplies. But as he looked at Delilah's terrified face, at Anna's tears, he knew he would find a way. "Give me 3 days, Xander said. "Meet me back here in 3 days, and I will have your money." Wallace studied him for a long moment, then nodded. 3 days, Cowboy. If you do not have the full amount, I start legal proceedings against Mrs. Parker. Clear?" "Crystal!" Wallace tipped his hat mockingly and walked away, leaving Xander standing in the street with Delilah and Anna. Delilah was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "You cannot pay that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Xander, I will not let you bankrupt yourself for my mistakes." "Not your mistakes," Xander corrected. "Your husband's. And I am not going to let some vulture take you and Anna away from me when we have barely started this journey." "But how? Where are you going to get $600 in 3 days?" Xander looked down the street, his mind racing. Then his eyes landed on a poster tacked to the wall of the sheriff's office. It advertised a horse race in 3 days' time with a purse of $1,000 to the winner. The race was open to anyone, and the entry fee was $50. "There," Xander said, pointing at the poster. "That is how I am going to get the money." Delilah followed his gaze, and her eyes went wide. "Xander, no, those races are dangerous. Men get killed competing for that kind of prize money." "Then I will be careful," Xander said. He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Delilah, I am not going to lose you to that bastard. Not now, not ever. My horse is the fastest animal in 3 counties, and I have ridden in enough races to know what I am doing. Trust me." "I do trust you," Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. "That is what terrifies me. I trust you, and I am falling in love with you, and the thought of losing you to some stupid race makes me want to scream." Xander's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. "Say that again." "The part about screaming?" "The part before that." Delilah laughed even as she cried. "I am falling in love with you, you idiot. It is too fast and too crazy, but I cannot help it. And now you are going to risk your neck for me, and I do not know whether to kiss you or hit you." "Kiss me," Xander suggested, and she did, fierce and desperate and sweet all at once. Anna, caught between them, made a noise of protest, and they broke apart laughing. "I am going to win that race," Xander promised. "And then we are going to settle this debt and never think about Robert Parker or his mistakes ever again. All right?" Delilah nodded, wiping her eyes. "All right, but if you get yourself killed, I am going to be very angry with you." Noted." The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Xander spent every daylight hour working with his horse, a magnificent bay gelding named Thunder that he had raised from a colt. Thunder was fast and smart and had more heart than any animal Xander had ever known. If any horse could win this race, it was him. Delilah and Anna stayed at the small hotel in Bishop, and Xander joined them for dinner each night. The easy joy of their earlier days on the road was shadowed now by worry, but Xander did his best to keep spirits up. He told Anna stories about famous horses he had known, about races he had seen, until her eyes were shining with excitement instead of fear. On the night before the race, after Anna had gone to bed, Delilah walked with Xander out to the stable where Thunder was housed. The horse nickered softly when he saw them, and Xander rubbed his nose affectionately. "He is beautiful," Delilah said softly. "I can see why you love him." "Had him since he was born," Xander said. "His mother was the best cutting horse on our ranch in Texas. When I sold the place, Thunder was the one thing I refused to part with. We have been through a lot together." Delilah was quiet for a moment, then said, "Xander, if something happens tomorrow, nothing is going to happen. But if it does," Delilah insisted, "I need you to know that these past 2 weeks have been the happiest of my life. You gave me hope again. You made me believe that maybe I deserve good things. Whatever happens tomorrow, I am grateful for that." Xander turned to her, pulling her close. "Nothing is going to happen," he repeated firmly. "I am going to win that race, pay off that debt, and then we are going to ride to the Double R Ranch and start our life together. That is how this story ends, Delilah. With us together, raising Anna, maybe adding to our family someday. That is the only ending I will accept." She kissed him then, slow and deep, and Xander lost himself in the taste of her, the feel of her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Come back to me tomorrow," Delilah whispered. "Please." "Always," Xander promised. The race started at noon the next day, with over 20 riders lined up at the starting point on the edge of town. The course was brutal 10 miles across open desert, around a mesa marked with flags, and then 10 miles back. The first rider whose horse crossed the finish line won the $1,000 purse. Xander sat astride Thunder at the starting line, his muscles tense and ready. He could see Delilah and Anna in the crowd, Anna waving excitedly, Delilah's face tight with worry. He caught her eye and nodded once, a silent promise that he would see her on the other side of this. The starter fired his pistol, and 20 horses exploded forward in a thunder of hooves and dust. Xander held Thunder back slightly, letting the more eager riders surge ahead. He had learned long ago that races were not won in the first mile, but in the last, when exhausted horses started to falter, and only the ones with true endurance could maintain their speed. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as they rode, turning the landscape into a shimmering oven. Sweat poured down Xander's face, but he ignored it, focused entirely on the rhythm of Thunder's gait, the feel of the horse beneath him. They rounded the mesa in 5th place, and Xander could see the leaders starting to struggle, their horses' sides heaving. "Now," Xander whispered to Thunder, and gave the gelding his head. Thunder surged forward like he had been shot from a cannon, eating up ground with huge, powerful strides. They passed the 4th place rider, then the 3rd, then the 2nd. By the time they hit the 8-mile mark on the return leg, there was only one horse ahead of them, a big black stallion ridden by a man in expensive racing silks. The crowd at the finish line was a blur of noise and color as Xander and the other rider thundered toward it neck and neck. Thunder was giving him everything, but the black stallion was matching them, stride for stride. 200 yards to go. 100. 50. Xander leaned forward over Thunder's neck, urging him on with everything he had. "Come on, boy, come on!" Thunder found one last burst of speed, some reserve of strength that Xander had not even known was there, and lunged forward. They crossed the finish line half a length ahead of the black stallion, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Xander pulled Thunder to a stop, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. They had done it. They had actually done it. Delilah appeared beside him, Anna in her arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. Xander dismounted and pulled them both into a fierce embrace, not caring who saw or what they thought. "You won," Delilah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You actually won." "Told you I would," Xander said, and kissed her right there in front of God and everyone, a kiss that tasted like victory and joy and the promise of everything to come. The race officials presented Xander with his winnings, $1,000 in cash, more money than he had ever held at one time in his life. He immediately peeled off $600 and marched straight to the hotel where Wallace was staying, Delilah and Anna following behind him. Wallace answered his knock with a smug expression that faltered when he saw the money in Xander's hand. $600, Xander said, counting it out into Wallace's palm. "As agreed. Now give me those loan documents." Wallace handed them over with obvious reluctance, and Xander immediately passed them to Delilah. "Burn them," he said. "You are free." Delilah clutched the papers to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know how to thank you," she whispered. "Thank me by saying you will marry me," Xander said, and then realized what he had just blurted out. It had not been planned, had not been calculated. But the moment the words left his mouth, he knew they were right. Delilah stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" "Marry me," Xander repeated, getting down on one knee right there in the hotel hallway, not caring that Wallace was watching with disgusted fascination. "I know we have only known each other 2 weeks. I know this is fast and crazy. But Delilah, I love you. I love Anna. I want to spend the rest of my life making you both happy. Say yes." "Yes," Delilah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, you ridiculous, wonderful man. Yes, I will marry you." Anna let out a whoop of joy and threw her arms around both of them, nearly knocking Xander over. They stayed there in a tangled heap on the floor, laughing like lunatics, while Wallace muttered something about insanity and stalked away. They were married 2 days later by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through Bishop. It was a simple ceremony held in the town's small church, with just a handful of locals as witnesses. Delilah wore a dress borrowed from the hotel owner's wife, pale yellow with lace at the collar, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Anna had picked. Xander wore his cleanest shirt and a vest he had bought specially for the occasion. When the preacher asked if he took Delilah to be his lawfully wedded wife, Xander's voice was strong and clear. "I do." When Delilah said the same, her eyes were shining with tears of happiness. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said with a smile. "You may kiss your bride." Xander did, pulling Delilah close and kissing her with all the love and promise he had in his heart. Anna clapped enthusiastically, and the small crowd of witnesses cheered. They spent their wedding night in the hotel, in a room that Xander had paid extra to have decorated with more wildflowers and candles. Anna slept in a small bed in the corner, while Xander and Delilah sat together by the window, watching the stars come out over the California mountains. "I cannot believe this is real," Delilah said softly, her head resting on Xander's shoulder. 2 weeks ago, I thought Anna and I were going to die in that fire. Now I am married to the man who saved us, starting a whole new life." "Believe it," Xander said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "This is real, Delilah. This is forever." They made love that night for the first time, slowly and carefully, learning each other's bodies with reverent touches and whispered words. Xander had been with women before, but this was different. This was not just physical. It was a joining of souls, a promise made flesh. When Delilah cried out softly beneath him, her fingers digging into his shoulders, Xander felt like he had finally come home. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Delilah traced patterns on Xander's chest. "Tell me about the ranch," she said. "I want to know what our new home will be like." "The Double R is one of the biggest spreads in the Sacramento Valley," Xander said. 5,000 acres of good grazing land, with the main house and bunkhouses and barns. The owner, Jacob Rawlings, is a good man, fair, honest, treats his workers right. His wife Sarah runs the household, and she is always complaining about not having enough help in the kitchen. When I tell her you are the best cook in California, she will hire you on the spot. "I hope you are right," Delilah said nervously. "I am right," Xander assured her, "and Anna will love it there. There are other ranch families with kids, so she will have friends to play with. There is a schoolhouse about 5 miles from the ranch where she can get a proper education." "It sounds wonderful," Delilah said, and Xander could hear the hope in her voice. "It will be," he promised. "We are going to be happy there, Delilah, all 3 of us." They left Bishop the next morning, heading northwest towards Sacramento. The journey took another week and a half, winding through the Sierra Nevada on roads that were sometimes barely more than trails. The mountains were breathtaking, all towering pines and rushing streams and air so clean it almost hurt to breathe. Anna was fascinated by everything, constantly asking questions that Xander and Delilah did their best to answer. At night, they made camp under the stars, and Xander taught Anna how to identify constellations. Delilah cooked meals over the campfire that were somehow always delicious despite the limited ingredients. They talked and laughed and made plans for the future, and with every mile they traveled, the bond between them grew stronger. On the 10th day after leaving Bishop, they crested a hill and saw the Sacramento Valley spread out below them like a promised land. The valley was green and fertile, crisscrossed with rivers and dotted with ranches and farms. In the distance, Xander could see the buildings of the Double R Ranch, and his heart swelled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "There it is," he said, pointing. "That is home." Delilah squeezed his hand, and Anna bounced excitedly on the wagon seat between them. "Can we go fast?" she asked. "I want to see it up close." Xander laughed and snapped the reins, urging the horses to a trot. They rolled down into the valley as the afternoon sun painted everything gold, and Xander felt a sense of peace settle over him. This was right. This was where they were meant to be. They reached the Double R as the sun was setting. The main house was a sprawling 2-story building, with a wide porch and flower boxes in the windows. Beyond it, Xander could see the bunkhouse where he had lived before leaving on the cattle drive, and the barns where the horses were kept. Smoke rose from the cookhouse chimney, and Xander could smell beef stew cooking. Jacob Rawlings came out onto the porch as they pulled up, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Ashford! Did not expect to see you back so soon. Thought you were on the cattle drive." "Long story," Xander said, climbing down from the wagon. "Mr. Rawlings, I would like you to meet my wife, Delilah, and her daughter, Anna." Rawlings' eyebrows shot up, but his smile never wavered. "Your wife? Well, congratulations are in order. Welcome to the Double R, Mrs. Ashford." "Thank you," Delilah said, accepting Rawlings' help down from the wagon. Anna jumped down on her own, then hid shyly behind her mother's skirt. Sarah Rawlings appeared in the doorway, a plump woman with kind eyes and graying hair. "Did I hear someone say wife? Xander Ashford, you got married?" "Yes, madam," Xander said, and could not help grinning. "This is Delilah, and this is Anna." Sarah's face lit up. "Oh, how wonderful. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted from traveling. Have you eaten? Of course you have not. Let me fix you something." She ushered them all inside, chattering a mile a minute, and Xander caught Delilah's eye and winked. "Told you," he mouthed, and Delilah smiled. Over dinner in the main house kitchen, Xander explained everything that had happened, the fire in Keeler, the rescue, the decision to bring Delilah and Anna to the ranch. He left out some of the more personal details, but the Rawlings seemed to read between the lines anyway. "So you need work for your wife," Jacob Rawlings said when Xander finished. "That should not be a problem. Sarah has been after me to hire another cook for months." "I would be happy to work," Delilah said eagerly. "I have been cooking professionally for over a year, and I promise I can earn my keep." "I am sure you can," Sarah said warmly. "Why do not you start tomorrow? I will show you the kitchen, and we can see what you can do. As for housing, there is a small cottage on the property that has been sitting empty. It is not fancy, but it has 3 rooms and a good stove. You are welcome to it." That would be perfect, Delilah said, and Xander could see tears of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you so much. Thank Xander, Jacob said with a chuckle. He is one of the best ranch hands I have ever had. Anyone he vouches for is good with us. They settled into the cottage that night, and even though it was small and dusty from disuse, it felt like a palace to Xander. This was theirs, his and Delilah's and Anna's, their first real home together. Anna fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the long day of travel. Xander and Delilah cleaned up the main room as best they could by lamplight, then collapsed onto the bed together. We made it, Delilah said wonderingly. We actually made it. I told you we would, Xander said, pulling her close. I keep my promises, remember? I am starting to figure that out. Delilah kissed him softly. Thank you, Xander, for everything, for saving us, for believing in us, for giving us this chance at a real life. You do not have to thank me, Xander said. You are my family now. Taking care of you is not a burden, it is a privilege. They made love again that night in their new home, and it was even better than the first time, all sweet urgency and whispered promises. Afterward, Xander held Delilah as she slept, listening to her even breathing and Anna's soft snores from the other room, and felt more content than he had in his entire life. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Xander went back to his work on the ranch, helping with the horses and the cattle and the 1,000 other tasks that needed doing on a spread as large as the Double R. Delilah proved herself invaluable in the kitchen, and soon Sarah Rawlings was singing her praises to anyone who would listen. Anna started attending the local school and made friends quickly, her natural exuberance making her popular with the other children. Evenings were Xander's favorite time. He would come home to find Delilah cooking dinner, the small cottage filled with delicious smells, and Anna would run to greet him with stories about her day. They would eat together as a family, then spend the evening reading or playing games or just talking. On weekends, Xander would take them exploring around the ranch, showing them his favorite spots, the creek where he liked to fish, the meadow where wildflowers grew in the spring, the hilltop where you could see clear to the mountains. A month after they arrived, Delilah told Xander she was pregnant. They were lying in bed together after Anna had gone to sleep, and Delilah took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. There is a baby in there, she said softly. Our baby. I am about 6 weeks along, I think. Xander's breath caught in his throat. Are you sure? I am sure. I have been through this before, remember? I know the signs. A baby, Xander repeated, wonder flooding through him. He had thought finding Delilah and Anna was the greatest gift life could give him, but now there was this, a child of his own blood, a living symbol of the love between him and his wife. We are having a baby. Delilah laughed at the awe in his voice. Yes, we are. How do you feel about that? Like the luckiest man alive, Xander said, and kissed her deeply. I love you, Delilah. I love you and Anna and this baby, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you all know it. We know, Delilah said, her eyes shining. Trust me, we know. Anna was thrilled when they told her the news, immediately declaring that she wanted a baby brother because girls were boring. Xander laughed and said they would have to wait and see what God decided to give them. The pregnancy was mostly easy, though Delilah was sick in the mornings for the first 3 months. Xander did his best to help, bringing her tea and toast before he left for work, rubbing her feet in the evenings when they swelled. Sarah Rawlings became a kind of surrogate grandmother, fussing over Delilah and insisting she not work too hard. As Delilah's belly grew, so did Xander's sense of responsibility. He was going to be a father. He was going to have a child who would depend on him for everything, who would look to him as an example of what a man should be. The weight of it was almost overwhelming, but every time Xander felt doubt creeping in, he would look at Anna, at the way she had bloomed under his care, at the trust in her eyes when she called him Papa, and know that he could do this. The baby came on a warm June evening in 1883, about a week before Delilah's due date. Xander had just come in from the fields when Delilah gasped and clutched her stomach. It is time, she said, and there was fear in her eyes. Xander, the baby is coming. Xander's mind went blank with panic for about 3 seconds. Then training and instinct kicked in. He got Delilah to the bed, sent Anna to fetch Sarah Rawlings, and then ran to get the doctor from town. By the time he returned, Delilah was in active labor, Sarah coaching her through the contractions. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Xander was terrified he was going to lose Delilah, lose the baby, lose everything that mattered. But Delilah was strong, stronger than Xander had ever given her credit for. And just after midnight, their son was born. "A boy," the doctor announced, holding up the squalling infant. "You have a healthy boy, Mr. Ashford." Xander could barely see through his tears as the doctor placed his son in his arms. The baby was red and wrinkled and covered in birth fluid, and Xander had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. "Hello," he whispered to his son. "Hello, little one. Welcome to the world." Delilah was exhausted but smiling, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "Let me see him," she said, and Xander carefully placed the baby in her arms. Delilah looked down at their son with such love that Xander's chest tightened. "He is perfect," she said softly. "What should we name him?" "You choose," Xander said. "You did all the hard work." Delilah thought for a moment, then said, "Thomas, after my father. He was a good man, and I want our son to carry his name." "Thomas Ashford," Xander said, testing it out. "I like it. Thomas Xander Ashford." "Perfect," Delilah agreed. Anna came in to meet her new brother, her eyes wide with wonder. "He is so small," she said, reaching out carefully to touch Thomas's tiny hand. "Can I hold him?" Xander helped her climb onto the bed, then positioned Thomas carefully in Anna's lap. "Support his head," he instructed. "Just like that. You are doing great." "Hi, Thomas," Anna said solemnly. "I am your big sister. I am going to teach you everything I know." "God help us all," Delilah joked, and everyone laughed. The days after Thomas's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Xander had never been happier. He loved watching Delilah nurse their son, loved the way Thomas would wrap his tiny fist around Xander's finger, loved how Anna was constantly trying to help take care of her baby brother. As the months passed, Thomas grew from a tiny infant into a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everyone and everything. Anna was endlessly patient with him, playing peek-a-boo and singing songs she had learned at school. Delilah returned to work in the ranch kitchen once she was recovered, bringing Thomas with her in a basket, and the ranch hands all fell in love with the little boy, taking turns making faces at him to get him to laugh. Xander's life settled into a pattern that felt right in every way. Work during the day, family in the evening, Sundays spent at the small church in town or exploring the valley. He and Delilah grew closer with every passing day, their love deepening into something steady and unshakable. Anna called him Papa without hesitation now, and Xander loved her as fiercely as if she were his own blood. 2 years after Thomas was born, Delilah became pregnant again. This time, there were no complications, and in the spring of 1885, she gave birth to a daughter they named Clara. Clara had Delilah's hazel eyes and Xander's dark hair, and from the moment she was born, she had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. Anna, now 7 years old, took her role as big sister very seriously, helping with both Thomas and Clara. Xander would come home from work to find all 3 children playing together in the yard, while Delilah watched from the porch, and the sight never failed to make him smile. Life was not always easy. There were lean years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There were illnesses that had to be weathered, accidents that happened on the ranch, moments of doubt and fear. But through it all, Xander and Delilah faced everything together, their family the anchor that kept them steady through any storm. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Xander took Delilah back to Bishop, leaving the children with Sarah Rawlings for a few days. They stayed in the same hotel where they had spent their wedding night, and Xander surprised her with a simple gold band to go with the tin ring he had given her during their hasty ceremony years before. "I wanted to do this right," he said, as he slipped the gold band onto her finger. "I wanted you to have something permanent, something that shows how much you mean to me." Delilah was crying as she looked at the ring. "I do not need gold to know you love me, Xander. I see it every day in the way you are with our children, in the way you kiss me goodbye every morning, in the way you look at me like I'm the most precious thing in the world." "You are," Xander said simply. "You and our kids, you are my whole world. I never knew life could be like this, Delilah. I never knew I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Delilah admitted. "Before I met you, I thought happiness was something that happened to other people. Now I wake up every morning amazed that this is my life." They made love that night with all the passion of newlyweds and all the tenderness of partners who knew each other intimately. Afterward, Lying tangled together in the darkness, Xander thought back to that day in Keeler 5 years ago, when he had run into a burning barn to save two strangers. "Do you remember the fire?" he asked Delilah. "That first day we met?" "Every detail," Delilah said. "I remember thinking we were going to die, and then you appeared like some kind of angel. I remember the beam groaning above us, and you telling me to jump into your arms. I remember being so terrified, but also knowing somehow that you would keep us safe." "Best thing I ever did," Xander said. "Jumping off that platform with you in my arms changed my whole life." "Changed all our lives," Delilah corrected. "Anna has a father now, a real one who loves her and protects her. Thomas and Clara have a wonderful papa. And I have you, the love of my life, the man who gave me a second chance at happiness." "We gave each other a second chance," Xander said. "I was just existing before I met you, Delilah. Going through the motions. You taught me what it means to really live." They returned to the ranch 2 days later to find their children healthy and happy, and life went on in all its beautiful mundane glory. Anna grew into a lovely young woman with her mother's strength and kindness. Thomas became a skilled horseman who followed in his father's footsteps working the ranch. Clara was the wild one, always getting into mischief, but with such a sweet smile that no one could stay mad at her. As the years passed, Xander and Delilah added to their family 2 more times, another boy named James in 1889, and a final surprise daughter named Margaret in 1892. Their cottage was expanded twice to accommodate the growing family, and Xander eventually became foreman of the Double R when the old foreman retired. Jacob and Sarah Rawlings watched their family grow with pride, treating Xander and Delilah's children like grandchildren. When Jacob died in 1895, he left a substantial portion of the ranch to Xander in his will, recognizing the years of loyal service and friendship. Sarah followed her husband 2 years later, and Xander and Delilah made sure she was buried beside him on the hill overlooking the valley they had both loved. In 1898, Anna married a young lawyer from Sacramento and moved to the city, though she visited often with her own growing family. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations as Xander's hair turned gray and his joints started to ache. Clara shocked everyone by becoming a teacher and opening a school in the valley. James joined the army, following his own path. Margaret, the baby, stayed close to home, helping her mother in the kitchen and eventually taking over when Delilah decided it was time to retire. Through it all, Xander and Delilah's love never wavered. They still held hands when they walked, still kissed each other goodbye every morning, still looked at each other with the same wonder and gratitude that had filled them on that first night in Bishop when they had promised to love each other forever. On a warm October evening in 1907, 25 years after Xander had run into a burning barn to save a mother and child, he and Delilah sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the Sacramento Valley. They were in their 50s now, their faces lined with age, but their eyes still bright with love. "Do you remember the fire?" Delilah asked, echoing the question Xander had asked her so many years before. "Every detail," Xander said, smiling. "Best day of my life." "Mine too," Delilah agreed. She squeezed his hand, and Xander squeezed back. "Thank you, Xander, for everything. For saving us, for loving us, for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for jumping," Xander said softly. "That took courage, trusting a stranger like that. You could have hesitated, and we both would have died in that fire. But you jumped, and here we are." "Here we are," Delilah repeated, and there was wonder in her voice, as if she still could not quite believe their good fortune. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out one by one, the same stars they had counted with their children all those years ago. Inside the house, they could hear Margaret humming as she prepared dinner, and in the distance, the sound of Thomas calling to the ranch hands as they brought in the horses for the night. "I love you," Xander said, the words as true now as they had been the first time he had spoken them. "I love you too," Delilah replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Always and forever." As darkness fell over the valley, Xander thought about the twists of fate that had brought him to this moment. A fire in a dusty California town. A decision made in a split second to run toward danger instead of away from it. A woman with hazel eyes who had trusted him with her life and her daughter's life. A beam groaning overhead and a leap of faith into empty air. All those moments, all those choices, had led to this a life filled with love and family and purpose. Xander had saved Delilah and Anna from that fire, but in truth, they had saved him just as much. They had given him a reason to stop running, a reason to put down roots, a reason to believe that he deserved happiness. 5 children, 3 grandchildren so far, with more on the way, and a love that had stood the test of time. Not bad for a cowboy who had once thought the trail was the only life for him. As Delilah dozed against his shoulder and the night settled over their home, Xander sent up a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had put him in that burning barn on that October day in 1882. He had jumped off a platform holding a woman and child in his arms, not knowing if the rope would hold or if they would all die in the attempt. But the rope had held, and they had lived, and from that single moment of desperate courage had blossomed a life more rich and full than Xander had ever dared to dream. The barn beam had groaned above a mother and child, and the cowboy had said, "Into my arms, jump now," and she had jumped, and they had fallen together into a future neither of them could have imagined, a future of love and laughter and family and home, and it had been worth every second.